All right, let's begin on learning all about growing and caring for blueberries. Now, before I get to today's talk, I want to tell you about a few other resources that will be helpful in learning more about blueberries. This is just a short list of 10-minute university handouts that contain lots of helpful information. And if you go to this website, you'll find these handouts and many, many more. And now here are two extension publications from OSU Extension that you will find on that website. These publications are research-based and have in-depth information about growing blueberries. So I'm going to make a request of you, and that is to download these publications and read through this information. And if you do, you will learn everything you need to know about growing blueberries in your home garden. And just so you know, the information that I'm going to be giving you today came from these publications. So let's get started. Here are the objectives for today's presentation. After today, I'm hoping you'll be able to choose the correct variety of blueberries that works best for you, learn proper planting techniques and soil improvement, learn proper care for the plants, including fertilizing, water, and pruning, and be aware of some of the possible pest problems and the solutions for those problems. Now, I'm going to start by telling you what people have told me that they have done. So let's say it is spring and you decide, I want to put in a blueberry bush. Well, this is what happens. You go to the nursery, you find a blueberry bush, and it has lots of blossoms on it, so it looks really good. So you buy it, you bring it home, but you're not quite sure where to put it yet. So you look around your yard and you think, oh, there's enough room for one here. So you dig a hole and you plant it. Well, I have to tell you that now is when the problems begin. And this is what happens. That first summer, you eat a few of the berries that did ripen, but they're kind of small and they really don't taste very good. The bush doesn't seem to be putting on a lot of new growth like you were told it's supposed to do in the summer. And you've also noticed that the leaves are beginning to turn a little bit yellow. And of course, you forget about weeds, and the weeds start growing all around the bush. And after the berries are gone, you kind of forgot to water the bush. So you're really, really frustrated because this is what your bush ends up looking like. So let's start over. And this time, let's learn how to have a successful blueberry bush. Now, the first thing you're going to do, even before going to the nursery, is to figure out what type of blueberry and what type of cultivar you want to grow, and the one that's going to do best in your area also. Now, here is a list of the types of blueberries that are grown in the US. And as you can see, there's several different types, but not all of these are good for home growers, and not all of them are good to be grown in Oregon. Some work well in other parts of the United States. And so what I'm going to do is over the next few slides, I'm going to show you the ones that do best for Oregon. Northern highbush. This is the most commonly grown type of blueberry in our area. A mature plant can reach 6 to 7 feet tall, but you can keep it a little lower through pruning. It is self-pollinating, meaning that you can have just one plant and it will produce berries. But if you have more than one cultivar, it will produce not only more berries, but larger berries too. Northern highbush is very winter cold hardy, and it has a long fruiting season between 3 to 5 weeks. That means not all the berries ripen at the same time. You can have berries anywhere from week 3 through week 5. So nice long fruiting and harvesting season. And the cultivars that are available do differ in their ripening times. You have really, really good cross-pollination, like I mentioned, if you have different cultivars. Now, half high is what we call the bushes that are a cross between a northern high bush and a low bush. They're about 2 to 4 feet tall, depending on the cultivar, and they're very, very cold hardy. They do yield less than the northern high bush, and they don't produce as much fruit if through their self-pollination, what I meant before when I talked about a different cultivar. So for more fruit, you want to get a different cultivar, a different half-high cultivar. And because of their size, though, because they're smaller, they are really excellent for containers. Now, the rabbit eye blueberries are only adapted to the Willamette Valley and southwestern Oregon. Winters in other regions may be just too cold for a consistent fruit production. They grow up to about 9 feet tall, and there are several blue cultivars that ripen late in the season. Now, they have several blue cultivar varieties and one pink variety. Blue varieties will need a different blue rabbit eye cultivar for cross pollination. But the pink lemonade, which is what the pink one is called, it's somewhat self fruitful. So you actually wouldn't need another one. But if you did have another blue rabbit eye, it will help with a little bit more of the pollination and you'll get a few more berries. Then there is Legacy, which I know a lot of people grow Legacy. It is a cross between a northern and southern high bush blueberry, and it is actually the only cultivar available for home gardeners and also only adapted to the Willamette Valley and southwestern Oregon. If you also have a northern high bush, it will help cross pollinate with your Legacy. And if they are cared for properly and they're in the appropriate, you put it into the appropriate area, they will actually produce twice as many berries as a northern high bush. So you might find that in the warm winter time, the Legacy may not lose all of its leaves. It's kind of half evergreen, I would say. In a cold winter, it'll lose all its leaves, but don't be upset or worried if it doesn't lose all its leaves. And then, believe it or not, there are actually some ornamental blueberries available, grown especially to be ornamentals. They're not grown for their berries, they're grown for their foliage and how attractive they are in the landscape. This is a photo of Perpetua, and it produces flowers, and so do the other ornamentals. They produce flowers and fruit twice a year. The berries are pretty small and they're really not that great tasting because it's the beauty that we want. But if you want them in your landscape, it's kind of neat because you're going to have flowers on this bush twice a year instead of only one. And you can see some of the different types. We have sunshine blue, perpetua, peach sorbet, and jelly bean. All are grown for their ornamental beauty. Now, to learn more details about each variety and each cultivar, OSU has a extension publication called Blueberry Cultivars for the Pacific Northwest. If you look through this publication before you purchase your plants, I think you'll be very happy that you did. This publication will give you information on the specific cultivars. It'll tell you things like the berry size, how vigorous the plant will be, even about the flavor, plus disease resistance, how big the fruit yield is going to be, and about when you can expect a harvest. And if they're suited for commercial use or for home gardeners. It's definitely another good publication to read. Now, this is just a very small sample of the different cultivars you'll find in that publication. Now, you might already know what blueberries you want, or maybe you already know what blueberries you have, and you might think, I really don't need to look through this publication. But I'm going to show you why I'm telling you about it and why I think you would really benefit from looking through this publication. Now, this is what that publication has to say about blue crop. It says they are vigorous, upright, open, easy to grow, but tends to overproduce if not pruned correctly. And that's really important because I have a lot of blue crop and it's one of my favorite. But I know from this information that they will overproduce if they're not pruned correctly. That means if I don't prune it hard, it's going to produce so many berries that year that it's not going to produce as many berries the next year. So I have to kind of think about how to prune. It also says that they're medium to large size, light blue, firm. They resist cracking. They have a small scar when you pull them off of the vine. They have a good flavor, and they have loose fruit clusters. Now, what they mean by loose excuse me, fruit clusters, you can see my husband holding our berry bushes, our berries up here. You can see that they're not real tight together. That's a nice thing to know about blue crop because there are some blueberries that have their clusters are so tight together that you'll find earwigs and other insects like to sneak in between those berries. So that's another reason I really like blue crop. And that's why this information is so good. And also it tells you that they can be a little tart if they're picked too early, and I can attest to that. They have a medium to high yield. They are really a large commercial value. A lot of them are grown here, and but they are good for small farms or for home gardens. So you figured out which type and which cultivars or blueberries you want to grow, and you think you're ready to go buy those blueberry plants, right? No, sorry, not yet. You still have a lot of things you have to do before you put those blueberries in the ground. So let's see what you need to do before you plant those beautiful bushes. Well, the first thing you're going to want to do is select the site for your blueberries. These blueberries will live for decades, so you want to make sure that you put them in an area where they're going to be able to grow successfully for years to come. Now, of course, having said that, I will tell you that transplant really well. So if for some reason you ever need to move them to another area, it can be done very successfully. Even old bushes can be transplanted. Now, planting in full sun is best. Even though they can tolerate partial shade, you'll find that the fruit quality is kind of poor and you'll have a very low yield too. You also want to avoid planting near tall trees because the root system of those trees can extend into the blueberry area and they'll be using up all the available water in the soil and they're also going to shade your plants. Now, well-drained sandy loam or clay loam soils are best. But if you have clay soils like I do, there are ways to manage that. We want the soil with moderate water holding capacity because they are sensitive to wet and heavy soils. So there's some things I'm going to tell you to help with that too. So first of all, excuse me. Yep, sorry about that. Let's talk about soil. Soil pH is one of the most important factors when growing blueberries, and I cannot emphasize that enough. It's important to have your soil tested before planting, and even doing it a year in advance, if you can, would be really nice because that will give you enough time to be able to adjust the soil pH if it's needed. Now, blueberries need an acidic pH between 4.5 and 5.5. Most of the soils in our area tend to be a little bit higher than that. And elemental sulfur, that is what you are going to use to low, that is what is used to lower the pH. Now, if your soil test comes out above 5.7, then you are going to need to use elemental sulfur to lower the pH. But if you find from your soil test that it's between 5.5 and 5.7, mixing ammonium sulfate fertilizer into the soil should lower the pH enough. You're going to want to read the directions really carefully in anything you add to the soil because if you add too much, you might lower the soil too much. And having a high pH or a pH that's too low can also you can also cause problems with your blueberries. Also, I want you to know that the warmer the soil, the faster the pH will change when you do put an additive in there. Now, the reason I said that a pH is so important is because, and listen to this, 90% of the blueberry problems are caused by a high pH. Blueberries are not able to take up the nutrients that they need if the soil pH is too high. Now, this poor little bush here has several problems. The most one being the high pH, and the other one being the weeds. See all these weeds down here? You can imagine that all that grass and that weeds are really competing for nutrients and for water. And you see this picture right here? This shows a plant with iron deficiency because of the high pH. Notice that the leaves are yellowish, but the veins are still green. That is a sign of Lyme-induced iron deficiency. If you see a blueberry plant with that, you know that your pH is much too high and you're really going to have to do something to lower the pH. Now, no matter what type of soil you have, adding organic matter is going to help. Blueberries will grow best with an organic matter greater than 4%. But when choosing what to add to the soil, you have to be sure that your organic matter is low in pH. And that would be something like sawdust or bark dust. And that could be from Doug fir or from pine or for hardwoods or from hardwoods. In our area, it's mostly Doug fir because we seem to have a lot of that, but any of the others will also work. And it's best if the organic matter that you add is aged and not fresh. If you're using fresh organic matter, that can cause a nitrogen deficiency because the microbes are going to use the nitrogen to begin decomposing the organic matter. Now, you especially want to avoid using fresh cedar or redwood. Not only is the nitrogen going to be tied up, but they also, if you start using those, it's going to injure your young plant. So you want to stick with sawdust and bark dust from Doug fir, pine, or hardwoods. Also, do avoid manures and compost and yard debris. And the reason for that is because they usually have a higher pH than we want. And they also can contain salts. And blueberries just cannot handle salts. And that's why it's great to have a soil test before you plant your plants. Now you've done everything we just talked about, and you can finally purchase those plants. But here again, before you do that, there are a few more things you need to know about purchasing those plants. When purchasing your blueberry plants, try to buy as healthy a specimen as you can find. I know that some people love to buy those Charlie Brown plants because they feel sorry for them, but that is definitely not how you want to buy a blueberry plant. Most homeowners are going to be purchasing their plants in containers. And if you do buy a lot of them, you might find a good source where you might be buying bare root. But if you're buying a container plant, it will probably be in a 1 or 2 gallon container, and those plants will be about 2 or 3 years old. You're going to want to look to see if the plant is root bound. Also, you want to get plant that has several shoots coming out of the bottom. You see this little plant here? This has about 7 or 8 shoots coming out of the bottom. That is a good plant right there to purchase. And if you have a choice, please do purchase one without flowers on it, because I'm going to tell you when you plant your blueberry, you're going to be pulling all of those flower buds off the first year because we want all the energy to go into the bush, not into trying to produce a fruit. Okay, everything looks good. You bought the best looking plants and the varieties that you like the best. So now it's time to plant. Now, when you're planting your blueberries, you want to plant it at the same depth that it came in the container. Or if it's a bare root plant, you want to plant it where the root meets the canes. Now, the general rule is to plant northern high bush 3 feet apart, 4 feet for legacy, 5 feet for rabbit eye, and 3 feet for half high. You can fudge on that a little bit. It's not set in stone. But after they're planted, you'll want to add the mulch, which I talked about in that other slide. You're going to water them in really good. You're going to prune off the flowers and any bushes on any berries that you have on the bush. Now I know you're not going to want to do that, but it is really important that you prune off those flower buds. OSU has done a lot of research and they have proven that the plants are healthier and they actually produce better flowers and better berries over the years if the flowers were removed the first year. Okay, so now let's talk about putting the mulch around your plants. Adding the mulch to your blueberry plants will help do a few things. Of course, it's going to suppress the weeds and it will help retain water. It also helps to keep the roots cool in the summertime and warmer in the wintertime. Now, we talked about the type of organic matters to add to the soil as amendment. Remember those? And you will want to use those same materials as a mulch. An amendment is what you mix into the soil, and a mulch is what you lay on top. Some people do, as a mulch, they do use larger wood chips, and even some people use pine needles, and that's okay. Some people also want to use compost, but I have to warn you about this. If you do decide to use compost, don't use any animal or mushroom compost because they have really high salt and they will burn your young plants. Now, if you have a mature planting and you want to use compost, you got to be careful because it's probably going to bring in some weed seeds, and only use 1/2 to 1 inch of compost. And then you're still going to want to add 2 or 3 inches of mulch on top of that compost itself. The first year you want to add maybe 2 or 3 inches of mulch and then increase that depth to 4 to 6 inches of mulch over the next 6 years. So each year you're going to be adding a little bit of mulch on top of the ground. Now, of course, with our climate change, irrigation has become even more important. Blueberries need adequate water to thrive. They have very shallow, fibrous roots that we call feather roots, and they're really close to the surface, and they are susceptible to drought injury. You see this picture at the bottom of the right here. See the brown tips on those leaves? That is a drought stress plant. This plant has not gotten enough water, and the water has not made it to the tip of these leaves. If you have this, you know that you definitely need to increase your water usage. Now, with newly planted blueberries, you're going to need to water several times a week, I'm afraid. And established plants, probably just once a week. Established plants can use 1.5 to 3 inches of water a week. And that's, of course, depending on the water and the soil and the age of the plants. You want to be sure to check to make sure that the water has gone deep enough. 1/2 to 1 foot, it would be good. And of course, as you can see, watering from the base with soaker hoses or a drip is really best because not only will it save water, but it also helps prevent the weeds from having watering the whole area. All right, now let's talk about fertilizing, which can get a little bit confusing. Now, the main nutrient needed by blueberry plants after planting in all home gardens is nitrogen, and specifically the ammonium source of nitrogen, not the nitrate form. If you use a nitrate form, the blueberries cannot take up any nutrients. Now, if you want to go organic, feather meal and blood meal have the highest nitrogen numbers. And if you're okay going synthetic, then ammonium sulfate or urea are best. Now, all of these contain only nitrogen. And there's a little bit difference on when you're going to fertilize, depending on what you're using. If you're using an inorganic fertilizer, they are applied in late April, late May, and late June in the Willamette Valley and southwestern Oregon. Or if you are in central or southeastern Oregon, you're going to want to start a month later because it needs to warm up a little bit. If you're using organics, you're only going to apply them twice that year. You're going to apply those in late March and mid-May because the organics take longer to release the nutrients into the soil. That's why we're starting them a little bit earlier. And like I mentioned before, the organic fertilizers do work faster in warmer soil. And now, if you do have your soil tested and you find out that it's low in phosphorus or potassium, you can use a complete fertilizer, like a rhododendron fertilizer. But if you look in the OSU publications, Growing Blueberries in Your Home Garden, it will give you more specifics. And I cannot tell you the amount of fertilizer you're going to use. That's going to depend on which fertilizer you choose, how old the bushes are, and a lot of other factors into that. So you're going to really have to read that information to know exactly how much to put on each bush. Now, another thing to know about blueberries is that they cannot translocate from one side of the bush to the other. So what you're going to do is you're going to scrape away the mulch. You're going to put the fertilizer in a circle around the plant. And then you're going to rake it in, and then you're going to put the mulch back on top. Oh, excuse me. Rake the mulch back on top and then water it in really good. If you have very new plants, they're new and you just planted them, you're going to put that fertilizer about 2 inches away from the crown. But as they mature, you're going to get a little farther and farther away from the crown because that's where the roots are going to go. So your mature plants, you can put them anywhere from 12 to 18 inches from the crown. And in case you're wondering, a mature plant is usually about 8 years old. Remember, you're going to be buying it as a 2 or 3-year-old plant when you plant it. Now, here is some information on how to tell if your plant has a nitrogen deficiency. The older leaves will be pale green or yellowish. You can see these here. They look a little different than these nice fresh leaves here, these younger ones. And some of the leaves are going to have a reddish color. And you'll notice that the shoot growth is going to be pretty poor. So you can see why having the correct pH is so very important. If the pH is too high or too low, the plants can't take up those nutrients. Even if those nutrients are in the soil, they can't take them up and use them. Oh, weeding. This is probably not the most enjoyable part of growing blueberries, but I can give you some ideas to make it a little bit easier. So, weeds do compete for water and nutrients. Putting the mulch on top is really going to help with your weed control. Watering from the base, of course, is going to help too. It doesn't spread the water all over the other area. And you've got to be careful because remember those little fibrous roots I talked about? They're really close to the top of the soil. So if you do have weeds, make sure you pull them by hand. If you use some kind of tool, you're probably going to hook it on all those little feather roots and rip them out of the ground, and try to keep a 4 foot area weed free around your plant. And be very, very careful if you're using any herbicides that are made for woody plants, because, of course, blueberries are a woody plant. Now, some of you may not have room to plant blueberries in the landscape, so you'll be happy to know that they grow really good in containers. But when planting in a container, you want to be sure that the media that you're using will be right for the blueberries because, like I said, they're kind of picky about their soil pH. The proper mix potting soil to mix is well-aged fine bark, 50 to 80%, peat moss or coir, 10 to 40%, perlite or pumice, 10%. Um, Now, if you use a higher amount of bark, like the 80%, the plants might dry out quicker. So just be aware of that. All right. Now, if you want to plant a northern high bush blueberry in a container, that's great. Half a whiskey barrel size or 15 to 20 gallon will work just fine. If you're going to plant those smaller half highs, a 10-gallon container or larger works good too. Now, in order to set fruit, the flowers of the blueberries must be pollinated by insects. Mason bees are really good pollinizers for the early flowers of the blueberries because they forage when the weather is colder and wetter than the honeybees do. And then as the weather warms up, the honeybees and the bumblebees come out and they're going to help with the pollination too. If you happen to be interested in learning more about mason bees, OSU has a great publication called Nurturing Mason Bees in Western Oregon. Plus, we have a 10-minute university webinar put on by Leah Pullman all about mason bees. Great video to watch. Now, blueberries are actually quite easy to grow, and if cared for properly, you will have few problems. But there are a few things you may come across, so we'll talk about those. Mummyberry fungus is common in the Willamette Valley and southwestern Oregon. The symptoms for mummyberry are the infected flowers turn brown and wither, and you'll see some dark brown necrosis on the stems. See this part here that's all brown? See these leaves that have turned brown? Sometimes you'll see a brown gray mass of spores on the flowers. And then, of course, as the blueberries are ripening, you'll notice some of them are still pink. These pink ones are infected with mummyberry. The fungus overwinters on the mummified fruit. And this is it down here on the ground. You can see those mummies right there. And if these berries stay on the ground, they will release their fungal spores next spring when the flowers are open and it's going to reinfest the plant. So good sanitation is very, very important. You want to remove and discard any of the mummies, pick these pink ones off, throw them in the garbage. And what you also can do is fluff up your mulch. If you have mulch over your plants, fluff it up in March. Your flowers aren't out yet. So if you fluff it up in March, all these mummies are going to release their spores and there won't be any flowers to infect. Now, blueberry shock virus is a virus that is transmitted by bees as they move from flower to flower. And as you can see in this bush right here, this bush has dropped some of its leaves, some of its flowers. Sometimes a whole bush will lose all of its leaves and all of its flowers. And if you just let it go, let it run its course, during that summer, you're going to find the leaves are coming back and you'll be starting to get new growth on this plant. If you prune it pretty hard that following winter, the plant will recover. And the nice thing to know is that once your plant has this virus, it will not have it again. Once it recovers, your plant will be fine. Now, bacterial blight, unfortunately, this problem has been showing up a little bit more often in recent years. Sometimes it's hard. People think, well, how can I identify bacterial blight from some of the other problems I have? And the easy way to identify it is because the symptoms, which are these black, Water-soaked lesions on the canes and black to brown cankers only happen on the new seasons, the previous season's canes. The older canes don't have it. So if you see this and you see it's only on the new canes, then you know exactly what you have. Now, all the buds are going to be killed. Anywhere you see the brown, all the buds in that area are going to be killed. Now, the management is to prune out the diseased wood. Try to avoid any winter injury if you can. And you want to prune susceptible cultivars when the weather is dry. And that's again where that good publication about blueberry cultivars for the Pacific Northwest comes in handy. It will tell you which ones are more susceptible to some of these problems. Spotted wing Drosophila is the most important insect pest we have in blueberry production in Western Oregon. This is a fruit fly, but it's different from the ones that you're used to because this time the female doesn't wait until the fruit is rotting. Instead, what she does, she lays an egg inside the fruit as it's ripening. You can see that little tiny dot there. That's where she has stuck her ovipositor inside. There's her ovipositor right there and laid the eggs inside. And if you were to open up blueberry, you'd find that it's kind of soft and maybe it has some goo coming out of it. You open it up, you'll see this little white? That's the larva. That's a maggot right there. And these brown ones here are the pupa. The reason they call it a spotted wing Drosophila is because the male has two spots on the top of his wings. Now, sanitation will help reduce the populations. Apple cider vinegar traps also will help, and I'm going to show you in the next slide. And I do want you to know that the late varieties are more susceptible than the earlier varieties because spotted wing Drosophilas have several generations a year. Now, one way to help reduce the spotted wing population is through these vinegar traps. And what you can do, you use a plastic cup. Sometimes people use colored ones, sometimes they use clear ones. And you want to cut holes in the top, 3/8 to 3/16. See, there's a hole, there's a hole, there's a hole, and put apple cider vinegar in the trap. The reason this one has this yellow in it, this is a yellow sticky trap, just so they could see which insects are sticking to the trap. Now, I have learned recently that there are some spotted wing Drosophila pheromone traps that are available that you might want to try also. We just recently learned that that is available to us. So that's going to be a really good thing to help. All right, my favorite thing to talk about now is pruning. How to prune is a question that we get quite frequently. It might be a little scary at first, but it's actually a lot of fun. So I'm going to go through this part kind of slow for you. The pruning objectives for a blueberry plant is to promote the growth of strong new wood because berries grow best on new wood and to maintain good fruit production. So this is how we're going to do that. But we're going to start by talking about the young plants because it's different than pruning a mature plant. When you're planting your new plants, you're going to be a bit different. Excuse me. The reason is, sorry about that. Got a little confused there. The first year after you put it in the ground, so you're going to put it in the ground in spring. If you're putting it in the ground in fall, you're going to be pruning that winter. But this is what you're going to do when you plant your bush. You're going to prune off 30 to 40% of the bush. You see this bush? This is what it looked like when we first planted it. This is what it's looked like after we got done. You're going to remove the older growth that has no wood on it. There might not be a lot because it is a young plant. And you're going to prune off all the fruit buds and you're going to prune off any flowers you see there. And I'm going to tell you in a little bit where to find those fruit buds. You're going to remove any weak branches, anything that's broken or anything like that. And then you're going to cut the branches off at the tips. You're going to do the, so you see this, how we cut the branches off the whips? We just cut them right down. Now, the following year, you're going to remove some of those flower buds. You can keep some of them. If your plant is pretty vigorous, go ahead and let it produce a small crop. Then you're going to also shape the bush the way you want. So that's what you're going to do with the young plants the first year you put them in the ground, right after you plant them. Now, these are the steps to go through when pruning a mature plant, and I'm going to go through these one by one in the next slides. There is one thing I want you to always remember, and that is the longer the shoots that the blueberry buds that have the blueberry buds on the tip, the better the berries are going to be. See this branch right here. See how it's thicker at the top? That is a fruit bud. There's where your blueberries are going to be. You're going to have a whole cluster right there. See these smaller buds down here? These are leaf buds. So now you can tell the difference between your leaf buds and your berry buds. And when you do prune, we're going to be pruning sometime between January and early March. And you want to make sure that you prune before the flower buds, these flower buds that are going to be right here, start to open up. Now, I have said that the best fruit, I want you to remember this part. The best fruit is produced on 6 to 12-inch laterals or 6 to 12-inch long shoots. That is, knowing that is going to help you when you get to pruning because you only need to follow a few of these steps and you should have pretty good luck. It takes a little bit of patience. And if you find one year that you don't have enough growth, then the next year you're going to have to prune a little bit harder. And if you find that all you're getting is new growth and not many berries, then maybe you don't want to prune quite so hard. It just takes a little bit of practice. So let's go through these one at a time. All right, the first thing you're going to do with a blueberry and any bush, actually, any plant, prune out the dead and diseased branches. And that means any time of the year, not just during pruning season. Then you're going to cut the canes that are shorter than your knees. In other words, do you see this little cane here? It's only about 10 inches long. It grew late in the season last year. It's never going to amount to anything good. So you're going to want to cut off that little one there. And then you're going to remove any weak branches that touch the ground. See how small this branch is? It's really, really skinny. And look what we have down here, a whole cluster of berry buds. If we let that bush produce those berries, you know who's going to eat those? Yeah, slugs, not us, slugs. Then you're going to prune out one or two of the unproductive canes. Now, I want to tell you, we want our blueberry plants to be around 5 or 6 years old their whole life. And does that make sense to you? So, what you're going to do is you're going to remove the older canes, and that will encourage the new younger canes. Now, you can see in this photo, first of all, I want you to see, do you see this cut right here? This was an old cane and it wasn't producing very well. So it got cut off, oh, I would say about 5 inches, 4 or 5 inches from the ground. And look what happened after that old cane was cut off. New canes started to grow from there. Sometimes they do grow from a stump, sometimes they'll just start growing from the ground. So if you look at this, you can see the new canes are nice and smooth. They have a nice color. The older canes are starting to look like they have bark on them and they're not very productive. And I'll show you that in the next slide. You also want to cut out what we call twiggy wood. Now, remember what I said, the best berries grow on the 6 to 12-inch long branches, not these little tiny 1, 2, and 3-inch branches. If you have a bush completely covered in only these little tiny branches, your berries are going to be small and they're not going to be as tasty. So you can look at your bush and you'll know I'm going to cut out these little tiny twiggy branches and I'm going to leave those nice long 6 to 12-inch long branches that have a berry bud like that on the tip. And the last thing you want to do is to thin out the center to allow some light into the plant. Now you can see the before and after pruning this bush. Most beginners under prune their bushes because they're kind of scared to prune too much. This little bush here is about 4 years old, so it hasn't quite reached its maturity yet. But look at the difference between the bush that hadn't been pruned and then after we got done pruning. All those low ones are cut out an older, see this older piece here that looks like it's kind of light colored, that wasn't producing anything. You can see that it's gone. You can see that some of the centers thought is removed. And I don't know if you can notice it on this bush, but there's a lot of little twiggy branches right there. You don't see any twiggy branches here, do you? Look at these nice long branches. That's what we want on our blueberry bushes. And this is the amount that was trimmed off. We do have a video that will show you the steps that I just talked about, and you can view it by going to our website. Now, birds can definitely be a big problem with berry crops, as many of you are probably already aware. And the only way to really keep the birds out would be to put your berries in an enclosed wire or a netted cage. This cage right here has wire all the way around. This is a master gardener named Marie. Her father did this beautiful job of building her this enclosure for her blueberries. All her blueberry plants are in here, and you can see the mulch that she has on top of them. You could try using giant eyes, the blow up snakes, or the owls, but they don't really work very well. If you do want to use those, please do try to use them before the berries start to ripen. And I did find out these giant blow up snakes, I did find out for me they work better if I put them on top of the bush instead of on the ground, because sometimes the birds fly over and they'll see them. But like I said, please make sure that you put them up before they ripen. Now, I did talk about bird netting. Be careful that you do not throw bird netting over your blueberry bush. If you throw it over your blueberry bush, you're going to find that when you try to take it off, it's going to hook on all those little berries, and then you're not going to have them. They're just going to fly everywhere. When are you going to harvest the berries? That's going to depend on which varieties you grow. That could be anywhere from mid-June to mid-September. If you planted a whole bunch of blueberries, different cultivars, you could actually be harvesting your blueberries anywhere from mid-June to mid-September. That publication, Blueberry Cultivars for the Pacific Northwest, that will tell you which varieties are considered early, mid, or late season. So you'll know about when it's time to harvest. And after you see your blueberries turning blue, if you wait a few days, they will sweeten up. But be careful that the birds don't get them because, they do love them too. All right, here are the blueberry resources that I use for this publication. And you will also get an email in 2 days that will have all of these plus more blueberry resources for you. So I guess it's time to find out if anyone had any questions.
Hi, Jane.
Hi, Cheryl.
Of
Uh,
course, people
so
have
got to get my
questions.
camera on here.
Yeah, where are you, Jane? You're hiding
Oh,
from
I'm
me.
somewhere here, technology. There.
There we go.
Hi.
Hi. Alrighty, so we do have some questions. It's, as always, a wonderful and very complete presentation. So some of these things are just questions that maybe we need to revisit again so people really have them in their mind. One of them
Sure.
is with the wet, the weather has been kind of strange this winter. And so we had a couple people that had questions about things growing in an untimely manner. One person said their blueberry had put on a vigorous stem that stands well up in contrast to all the dormant stems around. Should she cut it off? Should she let it stay? What's your thinking on that?
Okay. First of all, if it has berry buds on the tip of it, and if it's thick enough, then I would probably leave it. It's going to bend over a little bit once those berries get on it. But if you have enough room to leave it there and you don't mind, go ahead. Especially if you can get up there when the berries are there, if it does stay straight, you can get up there and pick them. If she's got a lot of other um, if she's got enough berry buds on the rest of the bush and she doesn't think she needs that one, they can cut that one off.
Okay, good answer. This is also a kind of a weather-related question. This one, she's noticing that her blueberry plant is kind of coming back to life. She's worried it's going to flower, and then in February we're going to have cold weather. Should she be worried about this? Is this going to damage
Uh,
her blueberry?
that's something we all worry about. There's nothing we can do about it. But if we have, like you say, everything's kind of started to grow this winter.
It
And
is,
if for
yeah.
some reason we have a spring frost or a spring freeze, it's going to damage a lot of our edible plants and fruits. So we do have floating row covers which are that white material that you can put over your, usually we talk about it over putting on our vegetable plants. If you're really worried and you think about it, you're going to have a freeze and you have all the flower buds and we're going to have a freeze, you might want to throw one of those over the top of it. It will increase the temperature underneath a little bit. Maybe it'll help.
It could help, and that would be a really excellent thing.
Good.
And I think we're all worried about many things more than just blueberries out there that are all
Yes.
wanting to grow because our weather has been so kind of hinky. Here's an excellent question somebody just asked. It has to do with pruning. So, pruning is between January and mid-March. So, are we waiting for clear weather? What is my cue for when I can start?
It's best to do it when it's dry, and you know you're going to have a couple more dry days afterwards because that way it will help any disease problems that may be there, because water and diseases just don't mix or they mix
Abs-
badly.
eh,
So if you can, and don't want to do it when it's freezing out.
Yes, you don't want to do it in super cold weather. Absolutely. You actually don't want to be out there in super cold weather. So,
No.
Um, now this addresses companion planting with blueberries always comes up almost every time you do this presentation. And
Yes.
I know pH is critical to good blueberry performance. So can you talk a little bit? One lady has creeping thyme around and now it's creeped up onto the crown of her blueberry plants. How far back should she take it? Are strawberries a good choice for companion plants? What are your thoughts on that?
We get that. Yes, we do get that a lot. Okay, remember this. Any plants that are growing underneath your blueberry are going to be taking nutrients. They're going to be using nutrients. They're going to be using water. That's why it's good to have a 4 foot area around your plant clear of other plants and weeds. Try to have a 4 foot area. That'd be 2 feet on each side. And a lot of people want to put strawberries under their blueberry plants. Strawberries need a pH of 6.5. Blueberries need a pH of 4.5 to 5.5. That's not a good idea. One or the other one is going to suffer.
Agreed. And two, one person said, "Oh, she has weeds and grass kind of coming up through the crown of her blueberry plants." And I thought you made it very clear that those just compete with the blueberry plant for nutrients and sunlight and everything else. They just need to be removed. As for controlling them, mulch is really the best bet for controlling them, correct?
Yeah, hand pull those things out. It's hard to keep up with them, especially if you have a lot. It is hard.
This is a cute question. This is related to pollination of blueberries. So she has some blueberries, but her neighbor has some blueberries too. So is that good enough? Does she have to worry about having, other blueberry plants to help pollinate, or can she count on her neighbor's blueberries to do that for her?
If, like, say she has if they're different cultivars, say if she has northern high bush and she has a cultivar and the other one has a cultivar, yes. Um, Mason bees will fly about what I think I can't remember, but I know that honeybees will fly a mile. So yeah, if her neighbor has them, they will help cross pollinate. Yeah.
She'll be so happy. She'll be very pleased about that. There was a couple questions about planting blueberries in pots and how to check for the pH and how much to mulch if you have a blueberry in a pot. And we have people with, kind of finite space for things and want blueberries. So they'd like some tips
Right.
on that if they could.
Yeah. Well, that in those publications, it tells you that formula that I said of how much bark and how much core and how much, perlite to
Hmm.
put in. There are some places you can look around and call around. There are some places that will have some potting soil that is specifically already made for blueberries, which is good. You don't want to use regular potting soil, but if that's what you have to do, you can get regular potting soil, take the pH of it, add some more bark or sawdust in it, mix up those things in it, maybe you might have to add some elemental sulfur to bring even that potting mix down a little bit. And then, of course, check the pH again.
Excellent. We just did get one question from someone whose blueberry bush is in a pot and buried in the snow. Should they dig it out? Should they leave the snow? What is their best bet?
Oh, they must be somewhere not here.
That's right. We are.
Um,
Yeah,
if they've
that's
already
amazing.
put the pot, they you mean the pot they don't have it in the ground. They have it in a pot in the ground.
No, they just have it in
It's
a
just the
pot.
snow is around it.
Correct.
Sometimes snow is an insulator, but you know, freeze and frost and ice is not an insulator. So how do I say that? Cheryl, you
Yeah.
might have to help me with this one, Cheryl. Um, if it stays snowy and it stays on the soil, it should be okay.
Done.
But if you get a freeze in the snow, I don't know. Gosh, Cheryl, help
Well,
me.
I would probably leave it alone, let nature take its
Yeah,
course. That is my gut reaction to that. It's snowing, the plant is dormant. When the
right.
snow melts, the plant's going to come back awake, and I think it will be
Yeah,
okay. But
yeah.
that is a tricky
Yeah,
little
it
question.
shouldn't be any difference from a pot than in the ground. The only thing you have to worry about in the pot is if you're going to get down to very, very freezing, the pot itself might get so cold that it's going to freeze the roots. That's when you need to insulate the pot itself. You can leave the
Right.
snow on top, but insulate around the pot, the container.
It, yeah, exactly. Even with roses that you have in pots, you know, when you anticipate
Mhm.
cold weather, freezing, you'll drag them close to the house or into a protected area and possibly use
Yeah.
bubble wrap or a blanket to put around the pot to protect the roots. So those are all steps you
Yes.
do before the cold weather happens. But
Huh.
here's a question about another container question. They have their blueberry bush in a container on the patio, and they don't really like netting, and they wonder how they can possibly protect it from birds. And I don't know.
I think
I actually have made a little like a box with netting over it that I
yeah,
can set over my blueberry bush when it's got berries on it, so that you can then remove it. And I realize it's unsightly, it's not ideal. This person is not into netting, so I get it. But I think the birds are going to
yeah.
take their share if they don't net it.
Yes, there isn't a lot to do unless you want to sit right beside it and tell the birds to go
And
away
then
all
chase it
summer
back.
long.
Although I have to tell you, I think those little inflated things are kind of a hoot. That you can
They're
kind of go, I don't know
fun.
why.
They're fun.
They are fun. Okay, so transplanting. You did say blueberries are very easy to transplant, and this viewer wants to know, okay, she has kind of a mature blueberry plant. Are there any tips? Should she cut it down before she tries
Yes.
to transplant it?
Yes, definitely. Cut down about a third or a half. Cut it down. If she has any really, really old canes, you might even cut one of those completely off or a couple of those completely off, depending on how much is growing up from the top. But yes, you want to cut it down some and then just dig as big of a roots as you can do, if she needs to do it now, okay. I mean, in the spring, you can. The best time to transplant is like October. September, October is the best time to transplant. But if you have to do it in the spring, it can be done. Just make sure that you continue to water it really good during the winter time, summertime.
Okay. Okay. Um, I don't know the answer to this question, and you probably do, Jane. If you have huckleberries and blueberries, will they cross-pollinate at all? She's wondering. She has some huckleberries and in the same garden with blueberries, and she's
I
wondering if
do
you.
not believe they will, especially
I
since there
agree.
are certain cultivars that cross-pollinate with other cultivars. So I I that's a great question, and I'm gonna look that up for sure. But in my opinion, I doubt it. Sorry, but I
I
doubt it.
I doubt that also. Here's a question that did come up is about propagating blueberries. Do you find propagating blueberries easy, not advisable, advisable? What's your thinking?
People say that it's kind of hard to. Usually they're propagated in August, believe it or not. In August is when people cut and propagate them. Some people, if they're really good at propagation, they won't have a problem. The one thing about propagating you need to think about is that when you buy a blueberry plant, they have them 1, 2, and 3 years old already. And the best thing to do is to buy a 2 or 3 year old plant because they're already nice and healthy and ready to go. So if you do propagate it yourself, it's going to take it a lot longer to reach maturity, but it can be done.
Right. I kind of researched that too because I was curious about whether or not that is a successful thing. And I think if you're committed, you can make it work. But as you say, you need to be patient. It's going to take
Mm,
some time for that to happen.
yeah.
Um, are coffee grounds a good fertilizer for blueberries, Jane? That's like
Good
one of
question.
your.
Are you with me? That's actually a myth. Coffee grounds have a pH of 6. Um, People think they are acidic, But once they're done, coffee grounds neutralize and they are no longer acidic themselves. So you want to put your coffee grounds in the compost pile, not under your blueberries.
Hmm. I agree. I thought that was a perfect question for you because I was remembering your myth talk, and I thought that's a good one. This viewer is feeling kind of bad. She failed to remove the flowers from her blueberries the first year or two, and she's thinking, how can I make up for this mistake that I now made, the big boo-boo?
You know, they'll still grow. Maybe if you would have pulled them off, you'd have a larger crop, but don't fret about it. Just take really good care of your plants and they'll be happy. If they're happy, they'll give you blueberries.
Uh, One last question as we're winding down, and you've done such a good job of answering questions. What would you say is the one key reason that blueberries fail to produce a nice plump crop? Is it pruning, fertilizer, pH?
If the plant is looking sad, it's pH. If it's not, if it's looking healthy but isn't putting on as many berries as you want it to, it's probably mostly pruning, but it also could be a little bit of, it could be the fertilizing, except if it looks nice and healthy and it, nice green leaves, just not enough, then it would be pruning.
Good answer. All right. That takes care of all the questions we had, Jane.
Great.
And the audience was so appreciative. We got many thank yous for the thoroughness of your presentation. You covered all
Yeah.
the main aspects. So
Well, I thank you all. I appreciate it's fun.
it is
Good luck
fun.
with your blueberries. Enjoy.
Okay. Thanks, Jane.
You bet. Bye.
Bye.